Welcome to the Classical Commons podcast, a conversation exploring the ideas, the people, and the trends in classical education. I'm Rob Jackson, founder of this digital platform connecting classical school communities to talent and resources around the country. Well, today's guest, as you can see here right next to me, is an academic entrepreneur. You don't usually find those words together, but I'm going to explain, and he's going to explain in just a minute. He's aiming to revitalize liberal arts education at the college level by rethinking the entire experience at college. He's served as a faculty member, an English professor at an established liberal arts college. But Matthew J. Smith has ventured out of his relative safety, the relative safety of the ivory tower, to found a new kind of college that uses entrepreneurship to really put some zing in the traditional liberal arts. Welcome, Matthew. Welcome.
Thank you, Rob. Huge fan of Classical Commons. As you know, I don't know how many times I get approached by classical schools saying, hey, do you have teachers? We need talent. We need school leaders. And among the many things that your organization does, I think that is one of the biggest needs facing classical ed. So I'm a huge fan.
Thanks so much, Matt. Tell us, our audience is very much interested, obviously, in this revitalization, this renewal of classical liberal arts education. And you and I both come from the academy. You stayed there. You're still working on this new project, Hildegard College. But I'd like to go back a few years. We won't say how many. They'll have to check you out on LinkedIn if they want to know just how old you are. But how long, or what was sort of inspired you to get involved in higher education, just to get drawn into this as a way of life, as a scholar, as a professor? What was the attraction to you?
I didn't grow up as a reader, and both my parents attended some college. Neither of them have a college degree. My brother and I, they set us on a course to go to college, and I kind of went mindlessly. Nobody really coached me through it, but had what I would describe as a really transformative experience in college, especially studying the great books. I was an English major. That is what it is. But it was through the study of the great books and a program I was in that I feel like my mind came alive. I almost might describe it like using muscles that I didn't know I had first time. And I would approach a difficult question or text and would think, I don't know how I'm going to understand this. But then I would do the hard work. If you sit with it, if you think about it, if you study the book and sort of submit yourself to these great masters, you can get it. Anybody who has studied great books knows that. But then secondly, I was doing it with people that I liked. So I was doing it with classmates whom I trusted, who became friends, with teachers who were mentors. And I found that work of exercising muscles I didn't know I had in my mind, it grew exponentially when you do it with other people, almost, as if the whole becomes greater than the sum of its parts. Mm-hmm. If there are any teachers listening to this, they know what that experience is like in the classroom. And I just decided this is what I want to do. There are people enjoying it. There are people growing through traditional liberal arts education, but there's still so much more work to do. And so I didn't really care what I studied academically. I sort of randomly chose to study the literature and drama of the Renaissance period in England, which I love and still read and write about. But my real passion was for teaching and was for students, not just giving them knowledge, but helping them grow into independent wisdom themselves. So that's why I started grad school. That's why I became a college professor in the first place. Not really because I saw there was a field that really attracted me, but because I saw a need in culture that I wanted to contribute to.
That's really interesting, because I think there are many in this work, meaning in the liberal arts classical renewal, if I may, whose experience, whose encounter, right, with the tradition drew them in. It was personal, right? It shaped their soul, and they decided, hey, I actually want to be involved in this. If this worked for me, I got to be helping others to have a similar experience. There's a kind of an evangelistic element here, right? I want to share the good news with others. And that, of course, if you decided you're going to do this in the long run, you went on to grad school. I'd be interested. I think our audience would like to know, did you experience more of the same at grad school? Was it a little different? Did it stoke the fire? You got to study the Renaissance. Not a bad topic.
Yeah, a mixed bag.
Okay.
The first real classic of literature that I ever read was when I was maybe 15. This is a strange story. I had a soccer coach when I was younger than that, when I was in elementary and middle school. It was this older Italian-American gentleman. He coached my brother's team and my team for many years. He became a family friend, and he used to drop off these VHS tapes of Italian soccer games from the 70s and 80s. And I used to watch these tapes, and I couldn't understand the commentators, but I liked the kind of pacing of the game. It became kind of meditative. He used to drop these off for me all the time. And one day he was at my house, and I came home and found him talking with my parents in the kitchen, just doing what they normally do. And he said, "Hey, Matt, I have something for you. It's in my car. Will you grab it? It's in a box in the trunk." And so I go up the driveway, and I look in the trunk of his car, and I see this box. I go to lift it up. There's two boxes, and they're just way too heavy. I'm thinking, well, these aren't VHS tapes, if anybody knows what VHS tapes are. So I kind of peel open the cardboard, and I look down, and I see these kind of tan-colored spines of books with these vintage-looking colors striped across them, gold and black and kind of maroon, forest green, and mint. And what it was this Great Books of the Western World, University of Chicago set.
Yeah.
Oh, this is weird. This can't be for me. So I carry these boxes in under duress. And I say, "Hey, Mom, Dad, here's some books that Coach Joe brought for you." And he just looks at me and goes, "No, those are for you." And I must have looked at him with kind of a puzzled expression, because I said, I think you'll like it. And I was somewhat touched, but I thought, I don't really read books. What is this? And so I just put them up on our family bookshelf, and they sat there. Maybe a month later, I thought, I'm gonna get smart. I'm gonna read some of these books. So I very, very randomly, I reached up and I just dragged I didn't even look, dragged my finger across the spines. I didn't know these names, and stopped randomly, pulled off the book, and it was Sir Isaac Newton's Treatise on Optics. So I cracked it open.
Nice entry point.
I'm gonna become a physicist. And 10 minutes later, it was back on the shelf. I didn't look at it for this set for another 2 years, until I needed to grab a book last minute on my way to high school to read in English class. We were instructed to bring a book. And so I grabbed one of the only names I did recognize, which was Dante. And I loved it. And I read it. I read all 3 books of the Divine Comedy, really with no teacher, nobody walking through it with me. That was maybe when I really fell in love with the process of learning. And I have to say that in graduate school, to your question, in my field of literature, that isn't what we did. We read some historical literature, and I had professors who had deep knowledge of Shakespeare and Milton and John Donne and some of these greats from the Renaissance that I was studying. But my complaint with grad school as a whole would be the complaint that I would direct towards universities generally, which is that it's just become kind of industrialized, commercialized, and professionalized. And what I mean by that is a major in the humanities, take like an English major, history major, politics, philosophy. They're really designed to create professional academics. So try as we might as people working in these departments to say, this is what the benefit of studying the liberal arts is, studying English literature or history is. If you look at the coursework, it's designed to turn you into a kind of a researcher. And it's part of the huge kind of higher ed industrial complex, if I could use that language, that has lost sight of the goods of liberal learning, namely the good of wisdom. And each of these fields of literature, history, politics, philosophy, they have something to offer us in terms of wisdom, but they need to be approached that way. And they need to be approached collectively. And so in graduate school, you're hyper-focused. You're doing a research project on some obscure topic. And to earn the credential that you need to teach college students, a PhD, what, the test that you have to pass is a defense of an obscure, deeply immersed research project. And so what sense does that make? And universities are full of talented teachers, but it's not by virtue of their graduate school training that they're talented teachers. And one of the kind of big myths I think about major comprehensive universities is that research and teaching complement one another.
Yeah.
This is a hot take. People will say they do. Of course, you need to know what you're talking about if you're teaching people, but not really. The best teachers I know are teachers who don't have PhDs or terminal degrees. They're teaching in high schools and elementary schools, sometimes in colleges. Lewis, a master's degree. This is it's just not true. And so maybe in some here, graduate school is not oriented, and I'm speaking in my experience. So in the science, right? If you're preparing for a research career, it's different. But if you're preparing to help transform students' lives, graduate school doesn't do a good job of it.
It's really so. I mean, that's sort of a sad commentary. I've been through it too, and I remember that sense in which we had to hunker down, as a PhD student, as a doctoral student, and find that area where you could become the expert and make that contribution with some original research that was somehow going to contribute to the field. And again, we speak from our individual experiences, but I think it's fair to extrapolate from most of the grad students I've known, and you've known quite a few over the years, that individualistic, I've got to do this thing, I got to lift this rock and show that I can, that I've got the same stamina, I've got the same acumen as my colleagues, I'm worthy of the credential, as you said, just seems to take away from that communal experience you witnessed or you encountered, you were a part of, and the thing that drew you in. So for a moment, let's just sort of blue sky this. Let's start tabula rasa. What could we do, right, in these institutions where advanced knowledge and deep knowledge of a particular subject is the goal, but where we want to continue to cultivate a sense of that, the exchange that takes place, the ideas, the banter, the back and forth, the refinement of thought. Is there another way we could do this? I mean, do you see anything out there in the graduate world, graduate training, that might come closer to the kind of experience that we've both had, right? In a seminar or in a group, in a classroom with a really fine, masterful teacher. Is there any way we could bring that into the graduate training regimen?
It's a tough question, Rob. I do think that as we see the general population more and more dissatisfied with higher ed in general, and we see new colleges starting on an annual basis now. I mean, every year, one or two new colleges is created, and they're sort of bucking the trends. We're going to see increasingly new graduate programs. The problem is that these new graduate programs aren't going to create graduates who are competing for jobs at research universities, but they might be competing for and working at alternative colleges. So I guess I'm saying it's sort of a systemic issue that begins with just this enormous bureaucratic behemoth that universities have become, where they've lost sight of an educational vision. I mean, that's really the sum of my critique of higher education, is your average university does not have an educational vision. Just go read the mission statements of whatever random colleges and universities. You're going to see the most generic language about academic excellence and creating change makers and things like that. And then if you asked a representative from that university, what will my student learn, or what will I learn there? They're going to look at you kind of confused and say, well, that totally depends on what you're studying. And beyond that, what you're focusing on. And beyond that, what professor you're taking a class with. There is no harmonious, there's no whole vision. This is something that, Plato would have a field day with. Plato, who was obsessed with
That's right.
this idea that any art needs to be a whole art. It needs to have an end in itself. He would say, what are we doing here? I mean, universities are like the sophist manufacturers of today.
Wow. I think that's quotable.
Sorry for that.
That's what we're looking for, my man. Hey, this webpage, what it represents, you're certainly not giving the typical banalities. 5 years ago, you, as I said at the outset, left the relative safety or security of your professorship to found a new college, to think deeply, create boldly, as it has it here on your splash page. What in the world possessed you, Matt? What were you thinking? What was the origin story here of Hildegard?
A little bit of exacerbation and a little bit of inspiration mixed together. So I think in 6-7 years ago, realizing that I wasn't confident in the experience that a typical university student has, not just as the one that I was teaching at, but in general. And I became aware of these alternative, especially kind of classically oriented colleges, both religious and secular, around the country that had started the past couple decades.
Yeah.
And so I thought I'd look into them. So I did, and I visited a few of them, and I got to know their founders and their leaders, their faculty, and I got to know, most importantly, their students. And I was just blown away. What I found were these incredibly mature and intelligent students at these small schools of 50, 100 students who were in deep friendships with one another, who were tackling serious ideas, who loved their schools, whose graduates were going on to do really ambitious and commendable things. And then they were doing it all in an institution that had a single major and that cost, I don't know, a fifth of the cost of a typical private college.
Yep.
And I realized at that point, the answer isn't to try to course correct an oil tanker that's just too heavily laden to actually turn in time to save anybody.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, just do something simple. Just create something that is laser focused on what matters most. And so for us, and I say us because it wasn't just me and a team of people that founded Hildegard College. This was a combination of studying the classics. We're a Christian college, so not the Christian classics, but the classics of the history of thought in the great books in Christian community. And additionally, guiding students in how to do something with their knowledge and conviction in the world. So this is a distinctive of Hildegard College. And in fact, I think you see this kind of new wave of startup colleges just in the past few years who are combining the traditional liberal arts with something some schools might call it practical, some creative. We use the word entrepreneurship. So we have a single bachelor's degree called a BA in Liberal Arts and Entrepreneurship. And the goal is to imbue students with the wisdom of the past and then teach them how to do something with it in the world. Wisdom and creation. I mean, I'm thinking back to Aristotle, these are his two major points in the ethics. Well, we're all oriented towards some highest good. Isn't it worth our time to stop and think about what this highest good actually is?
Sure, that's right.
Reflection and wisdom. And then in the politics, he says that, well, wisdom and the pursuit of happiness does not begin with the individual, but individuals find their fullest form of living in society and community with others. So the greatest investment that we can make is not just to ourselves and our own minds, but to society. So if you take those seriously, and if you translate them into a Christian worldview, where you have a redeemed view of society, this to me is the organization of a college curriculum that begins with the study of the great books and then has an outlet into the question, what does it mean to solve problems in the world?
I love it. I love it in its simplicity, its parsimony. But obviously, if you're reading the tradition, there are layer upon layer, right, of understanding of the nature of the human and of our condition and of society and the political realm and all of it, right? So you'll never plumb the depths entirely. But if you're reading through the tradition and at the same time, students are doing something. Again, this is, I've always wondered, maybe this is where I really want to ask you, why that division, right? Why that division between the theoretical and the thoughtful and that which is practical and, as you put it, creative, the making, poesis, right? In the Greek, why do we have such a division? It's a broad question, but I'm saying, why in the academy, why in the university world have we allowed that fissure or that chasm when we know we're supposed to be preparing young people for wisdom and to take their place in the world? What's going on there? And again, I'm only asking for a little bit of a diagnosis so that we can say, hey, how is Hildegard part of the remedy for that?
Yeah, people, that's the right question in my mind, Rob. People often observe the abandonment of the liberal arts in higher education. They talk about it all the time. Colleges, including Christian universities, closing humanities departments or consolidating them, investing all their resources in professional studies or research. But what you're touching on, I think, is more of the root of the problem, which is that it starts with the liberal arts abandoning the liberal arts themselves. So as the study of English becomes a kind of profession, or the study of history or philosophy becomes a profession, we're not really seeking wisdom anymore. And as a result, what you get is, in my humble opinion, kind of greatly atrophied humanities departments. And it's no wonder that universities keep the humanities and professional disciplines as far apart from one another as possible. It sort of makes sense. If I were in charge of a major comprehensive university, I would probably do the same thing, given the state that the liberal arts are in those schools. And so the question we ought to ask is not just what happened to the liberal arts, but is the question you're asking, which is, are we okay with the liberal arts and professional kind of career preparation studies being so separated that the people supposedly most likely to get a job are the people who have been least educated in the great tradition, and the people who have been educated in the so-called liberal arts as they exist now are the ones who have no skills and no transferable abilities to the workplace. I mean, we essentially give students not an education. We just kind of put them into a system and cross our fingers and hope this is going to work out.
It strikes me as a scandal, quite honestly, and maybe that's what is coming to pass, where this is being sussed out. The humanities, right? We're hearing report after report on the decline of the humanities, and students are bailing. Students are not selecting those courses. I suspect in large measure because, contrary to your experience of having encountered something great, a great conversation, as we often say, in those texts, in the community that you are part of, rather they're reading secondary sources and critical theories ostensibly pertaining to the subjects of Shakespeare, Milton, Donne, for example, and it's not that interesting, honestly. Yeah. So they're walking, right? They're just voting with their feet, and the universities are, well, maybe just taking note and saying, "Hey, sad to say, but we're just going to have to double down on the professions." And what will be lost? I mean, what will be lost as the humanities continue to atrophy, to use your word? What will be lost in the university world, where a humanistic preparation, a liberal arts formation is no longer core or central to the experience?
And people don't talk about this much anymore, but what is lost are the goods of the mind. And I'll explain what I mean by that. I mean, you can look at so many of history's worldviews, and most of the ones that I can think of look to the human mind, that is the power of thought. And in it, they discovered a different kind of end or purpose, one that wasn't fulfilled by society or practical work or even politics, but an end in and of itself. And I don't mean anything idealistic by that. I mean, you can look back and see how the classical Greek philosophers thought about the immortality of the soul or the mind, and therefore therefore we're for something greater than the meeting temporal needs in this life. Or translate that to the medieval Christian tradition, even in the modern period, following modern philosophers like Kant and Hegel, you have this idea that the mind is for freedom. That's what it's for. We can argue about what that means, but my point is that I can look at classical to modern periods and see that the mind announces its own ends. And what do we call these? One thing to call them are intellectual virtues. So not just moral virtues like prudence or charity, but intellectual virtues, namely wisdom, and indeed freedom. And so imagine a world where this major coming of age experience that we call college is one that doesn't cultivate intellectual virtues of the mind. It's maybe not that hard to imagine because we're living it. Because we're living it right now. That's what I think is lost. It's difficult to communicate to folks who are understandably kind of bound by their concerns on return on investment. Well, college, I'm writing a $40,000 check every year for one of my kids to go to college, and I got 2 more on the way. So you can see the systemic problem here. The cost is also a huge problem.
Yep.
And then you get universities now trying to keep up with the Joneses and demonstrate return on their investment by resourcing and pushing kind of professional and career-oriented majors, all the while doing even more to leave that formation of soul behind, like the things that actually make us happy. Every major civilization is right that the mind announces its own ends, and the mind is really essential to what makes us human. And we ought to attend to the goods of those things that make us human. If we don't, what do we expect will happen?
As Dickinson said, she keeps her own society, right? I mean, there's a sense in which this introduction, this rite of passage, so crucial to the young adult's awareness that I'm a relatively small beings here. Yeah, I don't have a lot, but now I'm participating in something so much larger, and I might be able to find my way. They're only 20 something, or 18, 19 when they first come into our classroom. So we can't expect a lot, right? By way of wisdom, although again, maybe a good family background, a house of worship, places where hopefully they've been formed. But what are you doing at Hildegard College to really make sure that wisdom is integral, right, to the studies in the classroom and outside of the classroom? What do the activities of the college look like that help in this soul formation that you're describing?
We made a very purposeful effort to simplify how our curriculum works on purpose. We want people that are looking at the college to know what students are studying here. And we can answer the question very directly when someone asks, what do you learn at your school? Where most universities would say, well, that depends on, a factor of 3. We can say, well, this is what you were learning. So we have a degree that synthesizes two ways of learning. One is called Foundations of Thought. So this is a great books program that works. It's 3 years long, and every semester students are studying some question foundational to what it means to be a human. So these questions are: who is God? What is the good? What is nature? What is the human condition? What makes a society just? And what does it mean to be free? So these 6 questions, we could add other questions. We're also talking about beauty and the sciences and things like that. But simply put, each of these semesters is its own little mini chronological journey through the great books, the greatest texts that contribute answers to those questions. And so we want students to be fluent in the best answers to those questions.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, students are in what is called the Entrepreneur Lab. Entrepreneurship is, for us, it doesn't mean teaching students to make the next big tech startup that they can then sell and become billionaires on. Our students do work sometimes on tech things, but entrepreneurship for us is more of a pedagogy. It's a way of learning. So the best way to learn to do something, to prepare yourself for work, is to learn to build things. That's how we approach it. So the
Mhm.
Entrepreneur Lab, in it, students are learning kind of practical skills of business and leadership. They're understanding budgets and finance and strategy and communication. They're learning how to make business models of different sorts. But they're doing it by building real things. They're building products and programs and services, initially kind of fictionally, sometimes, as a kind of experiment to learn from the experience. But
Yeah.
now we have students, undergraduates who have created real organizations or real products, or sometimes intrapreneurially for an organization that exists within our network. They're building something for them. And it's through this process of building, and then together we're giving them the tools and then coaching them through it, that they're learning how to do something with their conviction. And so we see this crossover between the Great Books Education and Foundations of Thought and the Entrepreneur Lab just all the time. An example of this would be that for us, it's not a study of business that we're teaching, but rather teaching students how to fall in love with problems they see in the world and do something about it. So an example would be our freshman fall, students explore problems in the world that they care about. And we lead them through a process where they kind of discover these. And we do something sometimes called the surface to source exercise. And this is, let's, if you're willing, let's try this out on classical commons.
Yeah.
So imagine, tell me if this would be accurate. Classical commons, like the superficial problem that it's addressing. By superficial, I don't mean not meaningful. The meaningful, but surface level problem it's solving is that, how would you say it? That classical schools need more good classically educated teachers.
Yep.
Would that be right?
I do.
Right. So let's take that statement. Classical schools need more classically educated teachers and leaders. And we would just ask the question, why? Why do they lack that talent? What's the problem? What's the source of that?
Mm-hmm. And my answer would be they are growing at a pace that has outstripped the usual pathways or the usual sources where they find the types of teachers, again, that are classically educated, where they go to a University of Dallas or a Templeton Honors College or a Hillsdale. Job fairs, by the way, at each of those institutions are jam-packed with classical schools looking for teachers, and there's just simply not enough. So
capture that, right? You have, there aren't enough classically educated teachers to staff these schools. Why not? Well, because the growth of classical education is outstripping the development of talent. Why? Well, you already answered the next why. Because these universities that are training teachers are misaligned with the ends of classical education. Mm-hmm. So let's go one step further. Why? Why are these universities that are training teachers misaligned with classical education?
I think those universities are certainly coming around. You're seeing more programs. We're now actually seeing graduate programs to train teachers, many of whom have not been classically educated. And so we're looking for kind of an alternative pathway, if you will. But that's a relatively new development. The universities are themselves beginning to see this market emerging and are thus attempting to step in. But it takes time, right? An institution has to construct and build and put together a program. And so it may be 3, 4, 5 years before they actually can deliver. So I think it's just becoming aware and then trying to put the institutional struts in place to address that need. And even so, let's assume that they were all up and running at full steam. I think still the growth is outstripping the need, the supply lines, if you will. And moreover, I would say we go to those colleges, and those 22-year-olds, average 22-year-olds, are not yet experienced as teachers, right? They don't have any classroom experience or very little. If they've had a practicum or maybe some other extracurricular experiences working with kids or young adults. And so we're, at Classical Commons, we're concerned that the newer schools that are desperate to find talent not rely solely on those young, eager, zealous 22-year-olds, but are able to find an array, folks from across the life spectrum with various amounts of experience, perhaps from other fields. We actually want to see a variety of teachers enter into these schools to make a contribution, so as to establish a faculty that really is representative of our society, and not just the young, eager, recent college grad. Right?
Yeah. So in this, we asked the question why, I think maybe 4 times as we were talking here. And as you went down, you could see, as you did at the end, that you can go different directions, right? There are multiple answers to the question, why does this surface level problem exist? There's not enough talent to meet the supply. Sorry, not enough supply to meet the demand for classically educated teachers. But eventually, as you go down, you get closer to the source of the problem. That's what we want students at Hildegard to focus their efforts on. They observe a problem in the world, and then we investigate the source. And as it happens, the closer you get to the source of the problem, the closer you get to these same 6 foundational questions. What is the good? What does it mean to be free? What makes a society just? So as we're talking about the nature of universities that struggle to produce the kinds of teachers that K through 12 classical parents want teaching their kids, what we're doing is we're asking fundamentally human questions. What is learning? Why don't we form students a certain way? What is the good of learning? So you can see how the study of entrepreneurship, as we approach it, has its roots in the same foundations of thought. So that's an exercise with our fresh, but we're doing this over and over and over again, exploring areas of work.
You've got a couple of cohorts now, right? So you've done this for a couple of years. Could you tell me what you're learning about the needs of these 18, 19, 20-year-olds and of their aspirations, because they came to Hildegard?
Yeah, our students are really trailblazers. I mean, we just started our 3rd year. So we have freshmen, sophomores, and juniors. We're a small, tight-knit community. We're deeply committed to mentor-driven education. And they're trailblazers in the sense that they've chosen to be part of something new, and they're doing it because they're independently minded. They don't want to just kind of go with the status quo. And we learn all kinds of things from them. Of course, I think that teaching itself, I think the act of teaching is not just me giving you what I know about something, but me learning from you how to teach you. And so it is a mutual, it's kind of reciprocal, or call it a dialectical act. Specifically, one thing we do a lot of thinking, because we're combining, unlike other kind of just classical colleges, which I think are great options for college students. We're different because we combine the classical liberal arts tradition with something practical that prepares you for a career. And so it causes us to ask different questions. And we're always asking the question of, well, what does the economy want or need? What does it take to translate this wisdom tradition into meaningful work in the world? One of the things that we've learned is that, of course, like your experience and your skills as an undergraduate matter. All of our students are doing internships. All of our students are working with real organizations as they're building and designing things. So they're getting this network and they're getting this experience. But the thing that we've found matters the most, I wouldn't even use the phrase soft skills. I would just say a student who is a self-starter. And so you see all of these statistics about graduates not getting jobs. And I just don't blame employers, because I'm not trying to be curmudgeonly here, but recent generations college graduates are not coming in with, they're not impressing employers with the confidence that they understand the whole picture, they're going to contribute, they're going to be a self-starter, and they're going to take initiative. I mean, initiative is the thing that I've recently been reading employers are most finding lacking in college grads. And so what does it take to build initiative in an undergraduate, this kind of self-starting mentality? It really doesn't have to do with what major they choose. I think it has more to do with what kind of student they are.
Yeah.
And if you look at even I would encourage people listening to this to look into return on investment research for colleges.
Mm.
What what information or factors predict the best return on the investment for paying for and spending the time at college? And best I can tell, the most significant factor isn't what school you go to or how much you pay or what major you choose, but is instead what kind of student you were in
Mm-hmm.
college.
Mm-hmm.
Were
Mm-hmm.
you the kind of student that is seeking out your professors in their office hours
Yep.
and
Yep.
trying to get the internship? And when you're assigned 50 pages of a selection of a book, you just read all 100 pages instead. Are you the student that's speaking up in class, or are you the one that's kind of trying to hide away and be anonymous?
Yep. Yep.
That is by far, as far as I can see, the strongest predictor for a good return on investment, by which I mean not just economically, but finding meaningful work and being happy with your decision to go to college. So what we're seeing in our students is this kind of unique combination as they're growing into it of reflection and wisdom. They're kind of deeply reflective. They're good at asking questions and reading books. But then there's a kind of savvy and resourcefulness to them where
Mm.
if there's a problem, if they need a job while they're in college, for instance,
Yeah.
they're not
Yeah.
typically just going applying at the coffee shop down the road. They're teaching themselves how to do something. Well, I'm going to teach myself how to design, and I'm going to go shop myself out to some of the organizations Hildegard College has introduced me to and get some freelance design work
Yeah.
or copywriting work or, youth programming or whatever it might be. And so that's been rewarding for us to witness the fruits of this kind of bet that we made, which is you can combine the study of classical liberal arts with a project-oriented education in business and leadership and strategy. Not really knowing exactly what would produce, but seeing that our students kind of grow into it. That's been rewarding for us.
I know you're on our mailing list, and you may have seen the most recent issue of Currents, our newsletter. But I highlighted something that I think is a little out of the ordinary, but it echoes what you're describing by way of this initiative, learning something as I go. If I need to get a job, but I need some skills for that job, then I'm gonna learn that, whatever it takes. And I highlighted this book by Doug Casey and Matt Smith, another Matt Smith, you'll have to get to know, maybe long lost cousin, called The Preparation. And it suggests that it's primarily for young men, although I think you could modify it for young women. For young men, they should go out, and maybe college is not the best bet right out of the gate anyhow.
Yep.
But that you could, and you look through its bibliography, The Preparation's bibliography, and it's great books. And then along the way, you're learning welding. You're apprenticing as a welder, right? Or maybe you're out driving cattle, learning to be a cowboy. You're going to sail, for a 4-month period. And all of these are built around apprenticeships and experiences while you're studying great works. Imagine me reading Melville, right? While you're out to sea, because he was out to sea, as we know, for a good bit of time before he wrote his great works. I just think there's something here about what you're doing and about what some of these alternative pathways that are being charted. Take a look at The Preparation if you haven't seen it. Again, I think it's something like what you're doing and could really be the next stage of revitalization of liberal arts education. Because if you're reading great works and having experiences that bring those works into your own life in a way that's it's far beyond just bookish, it's far beyond just the encounter with the text, which itself could be phenomenal. But if you're having some kind of experiential encounter with the sea, with the material, of construction. If you've built your own house, on a team, these are things that are going to absolutely leave an indelible impression, right, for a lifetime. And I wonder if that's not, if there's not going to be a couple of different models building on what you've done to really emphasize the wisdom and formation of souls alongside these initiative-taking, hungry, eager to have an experience with the world, all of which is to say, we've got to help the next generation that's become obsessed with friction-free. Here I'm thinking, of our digital avatars,
Yep.
to put them back in the world, right? Give them I want to see some dirt under their fingernails. That could be good for them.
Yeah. Yeah, I see new colleges either popping up or in the works all the time that are focusing on something specific and combining it with some orientation of classical learning, whether it's through the trades or through a technical discipline or engineering or something. And one thing that occurs to me is you say maybe not as many people ought to go to college. I agree with that, but at the same time, college has become, at least it's trying to become, all things for all people. So
Right.
Everybody can find a college. Even the student who's the worst student can find a college. A student who doesn't care about learning can find a college. A student who only wants to play on a sports team can find a college for them. But there's some section of the population of young people who look at college and what they see is sort of an anonymized, passive experience. They don't want that, right? They want an experience. They want to be active. They want to create. They want to build things. Maybe they want to use their hands. Maybe they want to, explore great ideas, but they want to be active. Those are the students who are either opting not to go to college or who are opting for something different, an alternative college. I mean, one interesting thing for us is that I would say the majority of prospective students who apply to Hildegard College are not really applying to conventional universities as well.
Okay. Yeah.
They're applying to either alternative schools, or they're thinking about something else. I'm thinking about coming to Hildegard College, or I'm thinking about doing this agriculture internship in Virginia.
Right.
Or I'm thinking about traveling Europe for 6 months and then maybe applying later on. And we like that. Those are the kinds of students that we want to see come here.
Yep.
I most certainly think that there's a sea change towards not just experience and activity and creation, but at the same time, really interestingly, towards deep thought. Enough of this like superficial, I'm going to sit in the back of the lecture and hear the professor talk about whatever pet project interests them.
Yeah, right.
I want to own the education. I want to ask the real question. So you see both of these things happening at the same time.
That's good news, my friend. You're a board member. If I could switch gears just a minute, you're a board member at a classical K-12 academy. How does that role relate to your efforts working at the collegiate level?
Yeah, I'm a board member at Orange County Classical Academy. So Hildegard College is in Orange County, we're in Costa Mesa, California.
Yep.
Orange County Classical Academy is a public classical charter school here. It's a Hillsdale affiliate school. I have 3 children attending it. I love the school, and one thing about Orange County is that we're a bit of an outlier in California. I think it's safe for me to say this publicly, but we have somewhere around 800 students currently, and something like 1,500 students on the wait list for this school. So 1,500 students on the wait list. So this just grows every year.
It's amazing.
And talking about supply not meeting demand.
Right.
And there's something happening here. And I think one of the things that's happening is that this classical education movement, of course, it's growing in popularity, but at the same time, families are becoming increasingly intentional about their kids' K through 12 education. You see the same pattern in the growth of homeschooling. When I was young, I knew some kids that were homeschooled, some friends that were homeschooled, but those were outliers.
Yeah,
now it's pretty mainstream. And I know lots of families who have gone back and forth between traditional schooling and homeschooling. So you see this independent mindedness. And what I would like to see is that same independent mindedness applied to the college decision. Because too often, and you know this, Rob, but too often parents and families are so careful about their kids' K through 12 education, but a lot of classically educated high school students don't want to go on and get another classical education. Maybe they think that they were in a small pond and they want to experience something bigger.
Yeah.
They want something active. They don't want more of the same. I think that's a pretty fair desire on the part of these 17, 18-year-olds.
Sure.
Largely because I think that classical education, and this is a good thing, I'm celebrating this, but classical education is, in my mind, essentially a K through 12 movement. It's hearkening to larger traditions in the liberal arts and even the 110-year-old tradition of the great books. But classical education is the youngest of those three.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's a K through 12 movement that has to do with the formation of young people for lives of faith in a self-governing society. And it's attractive to parents, but when it comes to the college decision, even though I commend the desire for these students to want something more, too often, in my opinion, they're just throwing that same intentionality out the window. They're going to whatever kind of bells and whistles they didn't have previously.
Yeah.
That's one thing I learned, at least in my role as a board member. I learned about the energy and commitment of families at classical schools like the one for which I serve. But at the same time, I see families wondering, well, what's next? Always asking us, what's next? What should we do for college? I want my kid to continue to be formed in mind, but I want them to have a career too.
Yep.
We're always saying that. What are the options? And I think it's at the college level, the question ought not to be, how do we continue classical education in college, but rather what's next in the formation of a classically educated young adult? What's next for them? And of course, it's going to incorporate aspects of the classical tradition, but it needs to be more. It needs to be asking that question, constantly revisiting it, not just renewing something that is old, but attending to what's coming in the future, a rapidly changing economy, the need to contribute to culture, all of those things.
Yeah. Very well said, Matthew. Very well said. As you well know, Classical Commons exists to serve the needs of school leaders in these K-12 classical schools, teachers, where we're trying to locate and even help train. And to some extent, we want to inform parents like the ones you just described. Tell me, would you have any advice to share with our audience as to how to go deeper and how to take the next steps in the pursuit of liberal arts education for them and for their children?
Yeah, what I love about parents invested in classical education is that they are hungry to learn, and they're invested in their kids' education. We talk about from homeschool parents to traditional school parents in the classical education world. They want to know what their kids are doing. They want to know what they're learning. They want to get involved. I love many of the graduate programs that are out there now at places like Dallas and Eastern that provide graduate, even Hillsdale, that provide graduate kind of master's level study in the great books. I mean, it's one thing to be challenging your child to read difficult things and wrestle with logic and grammar and rhetoric, but to know it yourself and to be able to come alongside them yourself. A lot of us were not blessed with a classical education when we were children. I certainly wasn't. And I don't think it's as intimidating as it seems. So we at Hildegard College, for instance, we do great work seminars for people in the area, professionals, parents, and employers, educators come and gather, and we'll discuss Plato's Republic or Tocqueville's Democracy in America together. No prior experience that the book require. There's programs like that all over the place. Another thing I would point families to, we've recently launched what we call the Core Purpose Assessment. And if we can, maybe we can link to it in the.
Oh yeah, let me put that up again.
The core, you can see it on our website. This is an assessment instrument that anybody can do, but especially high school students. You see it there in the bottom right. They can do it to learn about the alignment, kind of discover some insights about the alignment of what they're passionate about, what they care about in the world, what they're talented in. And I would recommend it for anybody, whether or not you're interested in Hildegard College, as a way of kind of priming your college applications. Even as a 15, 16, 17-year-old, do the assessment, you'll get a report, and it will, I think, help you to frame and discover some things about what sorts of study and work you might be fit for and interested in. We created it as a kind of precursor to a larger kind of core purpose workbook that after you do the assessment, you could download. We're going to be launching an online entrepreneurship course this fall for high school students specifically.
That's great.
Well, this comes with a little bit of college credit if you're interested in that, but it's really for anybody. And it's our approach to entrepreneurship, what we call redemptive entrepreneurship, where we're leading people to not just settle for the kind of surface of the problem, but kind of dig down to the source, use their convictions they've formed through their classical education, and then apply them through practical skills to real world problems. So that's a resource I suppose I would commend to families listening to this. Be on the lookout. You can sign up for the wait list for that on our website. Sign the wait list and you'll get information when that's launched. But have your kids check out this core purpose assessment. I think it could be really, if anything else, a good way for them to kind of prepare for writing something like a college admissions essay wherever they end up applying.
Yeah, that's right. That's absolutely right. Matthew, we're going to make sure that all of those resources are listed in the show notes. I'm thinking we may need to get you back here soon enough to describe in more detail. Maybe we'll pull you in for some member schools and others who want to know more about what they can do to look at those online courses, because parents are absolutely hungry for this. And I think want to understand, hey, my child is receiving something particularly valuable. I'd like to walk with them, right?
Yeah.
I'd like to participate in that, have a little bit of that for my own experience.
Yeah.
I'm so thankful that you're doing this work at Hildegard. We're excited to see it grow and delighted to be working with you as a collaborator in this revitalization of liberal arts ed. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, I've enjoyed talking. Thanks.
Join us weekly on the Classical Commons podcast for updates on this renaissance in classical liberal arts education, and subscribe to our podcast. Sign up for our bi-monthly newsletter.